The first time I realized Fred treated me differently, it wasn't because he smiled at me. It was because he ignored everyone else. At work, people called him impossible, cold, quiet, arrogant. Every morning, the office looked the same. People walked past his desk saying good morning. Someone always tried making small talk while waiting for the coffee machine. A few of the newer employees even kept trying to include him during lunch. Fred never reacted. Sometimes he nodded. Usually, he didn't. After a while, everyone stopped trying. "I've never met anyone that antisocial," Melissa whispered one afternoon after Fred walked right past her without answering a question. "I think he hates people," another coworker replied. I didn't disagree. Honestly, I thought the exact same thing. He arrived exactly at 8 every morning, carrying the same black backpack, wearing plain shirts without a single logo, headphones resting around his neck. He finished his work faster than anyone else, spoke only when necessary, then disappeared exactly at 5. Nobody knew much about him. Nobody except human resources, probably. His desk sat across from mine, not beside me, across, close enough that I could notice little things nobody else seemed to care about. He tapped his fingers whenever he concentrated. He always drank black coffee without sugar. Every Thursday, he ordered the exact same chicken wrap from the cafe downstairs. Little habits become noticeable when someone sits in front of you every day. That didn't mean we were friends. Far from it. During my first month at the company, I tried talking to him twice. The first time I introduced myself. "Hey, I'm Gerald." He looked up from his monitor. "Fred." That was the entire conversation. The second time I asked whether he wanted anything from the coffee shop downstairs. No. Again, that was it. I figured he preferred being left alone. Everybody else reached the same conclusion.
Life settled into a routine after that. Weeks passed, then months. We existed in the same office without really knowing each other, until one rainy Tuesday. The elevator broke that morning. Half the office complained while climbing 8 flights of stairs. By the time I reached our floor, I was completely out of breath. Fred was already sitting at his desk. Of course he was. He looked up briefly. "You took the stairs." I blinked. It was the first sentence he'd started on his own. Didn't have much choice. He stared at me another second. "You look exhausted." I laughed. "I feel exhausted." He gave one tiny nod before returning to his monitor. That was it. Nothing remarkable. At least, that's what I believed. Around lunchtime, Melissa walked over carrying a stack of folders. "Fred, could you check these reports before I send them?" No response. She waited. Nothing. Finally, she sighed and walked away. 10 minutes later, I stood up. I'm grabbing lunch. Fred looked at me. "Turkey sandwich?" I frowned. "What? That's what you usually buy on Tuesdays." I actually laughed. "You've been paying attention." A small shrug. "I notice patterns." "You want anything?" "No." I headed downstairs. When I returned, balancing my sandwich, chips, and drink, something caught my eye. There was a coffee sitting on my desk, black lid, small receipt underneath, no name. I looked around. "Did somebody leave this here?" Melissa shook her head. "No idea." I picked it up, still hot. Before I could take a sip, Fred spoke without looking away from his screen. "You forgot your coffee." I stared at him. "I didn't buy one." "I know." Silence. "You always look tired after climbing the stairs." Another pause. "I bought it." That completely threw me. "You didn't have to." "I know." Then he kept working. Nothing more. No explanation, no smile, no expectation. Just back to typing. Melissa walked by a few minutes later. She noticed the coffee. Who got you that?
I glanced toward Fred. Before I could answer, she followed my eyes. Her eyebrows lifted. No way. I smiled awkwardly. I guess it was him. She looked genuinely confused. Fred? Yeah. But she lowered her voice. He doesn't even speak to anybody. I looked at the coffee again. Apparently, he spoke to me. Not much. Just enough to leave everyone wondering why. And, if I was honest, I was wondering too. The coffee became a habit. Not every day. Not even every week. It happened without warning. I'd arrive at my desk after a long meeting, and there would be a cup waiting. No note, no message, nothing. The first few times I thanked Fred. Each reply was nearly identical. You look tired, or you skipped breakfast. That last one caught me completely off guard. How did you know that? I asked. You didn't bring food. I laughed. You notice everything, don't you? He looked back at his monitor. Only important things. I wasn't sure what that meant.
Before I could ask, he returned to work. That was another thing about Fred. He never stretched the conversation. He answered, he listened, then silence returned. Oddly, I began looking forward to those tiny exchanges. They broke up the workday in a way I couldn't explain. The rest of the office remained puzzled. Melissa leaned against my desk one afternoon. I don't get it. Get what? He barely acknowledges any of us. I glanced across the room. Fred was reviewing a report, completely focused. He isn't that bad. She stared at me. Gerald, I asked him whether he wanted cake during Mark's birthday. And? He looked at me for 5 seconds. I smiled. Then, he walked away. I couldn't help laughing. Melissa pointed toward Fred. But yesterday I watched him ask whether you remembered your umbrella. I blinked. I guess he did. You guess? I don't know why. She folded her arms. I've worked here nearly 3 years. He has never started a conversation with me.
That stayed in my head longer than I expected. Maybe she was exaggerating. Maybe not. A chance to find out came 2 days later. Our department gathered in the conference room for a planning session. Nearly everyone chatted before the manager arrived. Mark joked with Sarah. Melissa talked about vacation plans. Fred sat quietly near the window. Nobody bothered him. About halfway through the meeting, our manager divided everyone into pairs. We'll need each team to finish this project before Friday. Names filled the room. When mine came up, I looked around. Gerald, you'll work with Fred. A few coworkers exchanged surprised looks. Mark actually chuckled. Good luck getting 10 words out of him. Fred didn't react. After the meeting, we carried our laptops into one of the smaller offices. The room became quiet almost immediately. I smiled. Guess it's just us. It appears that way. I waited. Nothing else. We started reviewing the files. An hour passed without much conversation. Oddly, it wasn't uncomfortable. Fred worked quickly. Whenever I asked a question, he'd answer clearly, then continue typing. Everything felt easy. Around 4 in the afternoon, my stomach growled loudly. I covered my face. Please pretend you didn't hear that. I heard it. I skipped lunch. I know. You know? You've been working continuously. I leaned back. I lost track of time. Fred saved his document. Come with me. I looked at him. Where? Downstairs. 5 minutes later, we were standing in the little cafe across the street. The owner smiled the second Fred walked inside. The usual? Fred nodded. Then he looked at me. Turkey sandwich. I laughed. You remembered. You order it every Thursday. The owner smiled at me. Your friend knows you well. Friend. The word hung between us. Fred didn't correct him. Neither did I. We carried our food outside. There was a small patio with only 3 tables. Fred picked the corner one. For a while, we ate quietly. Then I decided to take a chance. You've always been this quiet? He looked toward the street. No. That surprised me. No? I talked more. What changed? His expression didn't shift. People. I waited. He didn't continue. You had bad experiences? A long pause followed. Finally, he nodded once. Enough. I respected the silence after that. A few minutes later, he glanced at me. You ask thoughtful questions. I smiled. I hope that's a compliment. It is. Coming from Fred, it felt unusually meaningful. Back at the office, everyone noticed we'd returned together. Melissa looked between us. You two actually went somewhere? We grabbed lunch. She looked ready to faint. You invited him? I pointed toward Fred. He invited me. Her eyes grew even wider. Fred walked past without saying anything. Melissa turned back toward me. I've never seen him invite anybody anywhere. Neither had I. And judging by the curious look spreading across the office, nobody else had either. After that lunch, people stopped pretending they weren't curious. Every little interaction became office gossip. If Fred asked whether I needed a document, somebody noticed. If I walked past his desk and we exchanged a few words, somebody noticed. It reached the point where Mark leaned over my cubicle one morning with a grin. What exactly did you do? I looked up from my computer. Do? Whatever made Fred like you. I laughed. I honestly have no idea. Mark glanced across the room. I've worked beside him for nearly 2 years. He never asked how my weekend went. Almost on cue, Fred walked into the office. He placed his backpack beneath his desk. His eyes moved across the room. They landed on me. Morning, Gerald. The room became completely quiet. I answered with a smile. Morning, Fred. He gave a small nod and started working. Mark stared at me. There. What? He greeted you. I guess he did. He didn't greet anybody else. I looked around. Mark was right.
Fred hadn't acknowledged another person. The realization felt strange. Not exciting. More confusing than anything. Later that afternoon, our manager called everyone into another meeting. A new client had requested a full presentation within 10 days. The assignment would require long hours, extra planning, plenty of teamwork. Our manager looked around the room. I'll need volunteers willing to stay late this week. Nobody rushed forward. Neither did I. Fred quietly raised his hand. That surprised everyone. Then I raised mine. Our manager smiled. Perfect. By 6 o'clock, the office looked almost empty. Only 4 people remained. Around 7, even they packed up. Eventually, only Fred and I stayed. The building felt unusually peaceful without ringing phones and conversations. I stretched my arms. My brain feels completely fried. Fred closed one spreadsheet. You've been staring at numbers for 3 hours. I can barely read them now. He stood. Take a break. What about you?
I'll keep working. I walked toward the break room. A minute later, I returned carrying 2 bottles of water. I placed one beside him. You forgot to drink anything. He looked at the bottle, then at me. You noticed. I guess I'm learning from the expert. For the first time, Fred smiled. It wasn't dramatic, just a tiny curve at the corner of his mouth, barely visible, yet it changed his entire face. You smile, I said before thinking. His expression turned almost embarrassed. Sometimes. You should do it more. He looked away. I don't usually have a reason. The answer lingered in my mind. Around 8:30 we finally finished. Outside, heavy rain covered the parking lot. I searched my backpack. Great. Fred looked over. What happened? I left my umbrella at home. Without another word, he opened his own. It was large enough for 2 people. You can walk with me. You'll get wet. No. The walk toward the parking garage lasted only 5 minutes.
Neither of us hurried. Rain bounced off the pavement around us. The city lights reflected across the wet streets. It gets quiet after work, I said. I like quiet. I figured. He glanced toward me. Most people think quiet means unfriendly. I don't. You did. I laughed. Fair point. What changed? I thought about it. I realized you listen more than you speak. He nodded slowly. My father always said people reveal themselves when they aren't talking. Was he right? Usually. We reached my car. I stopped beneath the umbrella. Thanks. Fred looked toward his own car a few spaces away. Drive carefully. You too. I climbed inside. Before closing the door, I looked back. Fred waited until I started the engine. Only then did he walk away. The next morning, Melissa walked over carrying her coffee. I saw you two leaving together. I smiled. It was raining. And? He shared his umbrella. She blinked.
I'm beginning to think you're the only person he actually enjoys being around. I wanted to disagree. Instead, I remembered the way he'd smiled the night before, and I wasn't certain anymore. Monday started differently, not because anything happened between Fred and me, because everyone else noticed it before I did. I had barely sat down when Mark rolled his chair over. He's waiting. I looked up. Who? Mark pointed across the office. Fred. He was standing beside the printer, holding a folder. The second our eyes met, he walked over. I finished reviewing the proposal. He handed me the folder. I marked a few sections. Already? He wanted to send it before noon. I accepted it. Thanks. He nodded once. I'll be at my desk. Then he walked away. Mark watched the entire exchange. I've officially given up trying to understand him. I laughed. He's just helpful. Helpful? Mark lowered his voice. Gerald, I asked him where the extra printer paper was last week. And? He looked directly at the cabinet. Then? That was it. I couldn't stop smiling. Around lunchtime, Melissa stopped beside my desk. We're all going across the street. She glanced toward Fred. You coming? Before I answered, she looked at him. Fred? He didn't even lift his head. No, she sighed. See? Then she walked away with everyone else. A minute later, I stood. I'm grabbing food. Fred looked up. I know. You know? You looked at the clock 3 times. I laughed. I didn't realize I did. You were hungry. I guess you're right. I hesitated. You still don't want lunch? He closed his laptop. I'll come. That nearly made me lose my balance. Really? Yes. 5 minutes later, we entered the cafe. The owner smiled again. You brought your friend back. Fred gave a quiet nod. We ordered and found the same table outside. The weather had turned warm after days of rain. People filled the sidewalks. Cars rolled past at a steady pace.
For a while, we simply enjoyed the calm. Then I asked something that had been sitting in my mind for weeks. Can I ask you something? You usually do, I smiled. Why me? Fred looked genuinely confused. What do you mean? Everyone says you ignore people. Silence. They aren't completely wrong. Yet you talk to me. He looked down at his coffee. I do. Why? His fingers rested around the paper cup. You never pushed. I frowned slightly. I don't understand. When we first met, you introduced yourself. I nodded. After that, you stopped trying. I figured you wanted space. You respected it. He looked back at me. Most people don't. His voice stayed calm. They keep forcing conversations. They assume silence needs fixing. I listened carefully. You never did. I thought you preferred quiet. I do. Another pause settled between us. Then he surprised me again. I noticed something else. What? You speak kindly to everyone. I blinked. I try. You thank people. You remember names. You apologize even when mistakes aren't yours. Heat reached my face. I never thought anybody paid attention. I did. That answer stayed with me the rest of lunch. Back upstairs, work became hectic. Emails piled up. Clients called. Deadlines moved closer. By late afternoon, I rubbed my eyes, trying to finish another report. Fred stopped beside my desk. You've been staring at that page for 10 minutes. I can't figure out this last section. He pulled another chair beside mine. May I? I slid my laptop toward him. He studied the numbers. His shoulder brushed mine for a second as he reached across the keyboard. Neither of us moved away. I found it. He pointed at one misplaced figure. This number belongs here. I laughed. I've been looking at that forever. You were tired. Again. He stood. Take a break. As he walked back to his desk, I noticed something unusual. Several coworkers were watching us. Melissa raised one eyebrow.
Mark quietly shook his head. When everyone left for the evening, Melissa stopped beside me. I need to ask. Ask what? Are you two dating? I nearly choked on my water. What? I'm serious. No. You spend every lunch together. He waits for you. He smiles around you. He doesn't even answer my questions. I couldn't think of a response, because everything she said was true. That evening, Fred and I left together again. This time there wasn't any rain. We walked toward the parking garage under a sky painted orange by the setting sun. Halfway there, Fred slowed down. I don't enjoy crowds. I noticed. They're loud. They expect things. I nodded. They make you tired. Yes. He looked at me for a long moment. But you're quiet. I smiled. I can be. No. He shook his head gently. You make quiet feel comfortable. For a second, I forgot we were standing in the middle of a busy sidewalk. Nobody had ever described me that way. Fred unlocked his car. Before getting inside, he looked back at me. I'm glad you sit across from me, Gerald. Then he drove away. I stood there another minute, watching his car disappear into traffic, and for the first time, I wondered whether this had stopped being simple friendship without either of us realizing it. After that evening, something changed, not dramatically. Neither of us suddenly became different people. Fred remained quiet. I remained the one who usually started conversations. Yet there was an ease between us that hadn't existed before. The following morning, I walked into the office carrying 2 coffees, one for me, one for him. I placed the second cup beside his keyboard. "I remembered your order." Fred looked at it, then at me. "You didn't have to." "I know." A tiny smile appeared. "You remembered. Black, no sugar. You noticed things. I had a good teacher." He looked down for a second. When he looked back up, there was that faint smile again. It still felt rare.
Still felt genuine. Around noon, our manager gathered everyone together. "I've got good news." The room quieted. "Our presentation impressed the client." A few people clapped. "We'll celebrate Friday evening." Mark groaned dramatically. "Please tell me this isn't another mandatory team-building event." The manager laughed. "Nothing complicated. Dinner. Everybody's invited." A few people cheered. Melissa immediately started discussing restaurants. Fred quietly returned to his work. I waited until everyone scattered. "You coming Friday?" "No." "You already decided?" "I don't enjoy large dinners." "It'll only be the office." "That's already large." I couldn't argue with that. Friday arrived faster than expected. The office buzzed with excitement all afternoon. People finished work early. Reservations were confirmed. Around 5, everyone began packing. Melissa walked over. "Gerald." "Yeah? You'll ride with us?" "I'll meet everyone there." She nodded, then looked toward Fred.
"You sure you won't come?" He politely shook his head. "No, thank you." She sighed. "One day." After everyone left, only Fred and I remained. He was shutting down his computer. "You should go." "I've got time." He picked up his backpack. "I know." A quiet moment passed. Then I asked the question sitting in my head. "What are you doing tonight?" "Nothing." "You always spend Friday alone?" "I usually read." I smiled. "What if we skip the restaurant?" He looked surprised. "What?" "We could grab dinner somewhere quieter." He didn't answer immediately. I wondered whether I'd pushed too far. Finally, "Just us?" "Only if you want." His eyes stayed on mine. "I'd like that." Those 4 words felt strangely important. 20 minutes later, we found a small diner several blocks away. It wasn't crowded. Soft music played in the background. Only a handful of tables were occupied. "This is nice," I said. Fred nodded. "Quiet." I remembered. I noticed. We ordered burgers and talked between bites. Not constantly. Comfortable silence still filled plenty of moments. Oddly, I liked that. I never felt pressure to keep speaking. At one point, I looked across the table. "You know?" "What?" "I've never asked where you grew up." "A small town." "You still visit?" "No." The answer arrived quickly. Too quickly. "You don't have family there?" "My mother moved." "And your father?" Fred looked out the window. "He passed away." "I'm sorry." He gave a small nod. "It was years ago." Neither of us spoke for nearly a minute. Then he surprised me. "He would have liked you." I looked up. "What makes you say that?" He appreciated gentle people. My chest tightened. "You barely know me."
I know enough. His voice stayed calm. You hold doors for strangers. You thank servers. You never interrupt people. I laughed softly. You've really been paying attention. Every day. The words settled over the table. Neither of us looked away. The waitress arrived with our food, breaking the moment. Later, after dinner, we stepped outside. The evening air felt cool. Street lights reflected across the sidewalks. Neither of us seemed eager to leave. You know, I said, everyone thinks you ignore people. I do, but not me. No. Why? Fred slipped his hands into his pockets. I've been trying to answer that myself. He looked toward the quiet street before continuing. When I first met you, you didn't ask anything from me. You weren't trying to impress me. You simply treated me like everyone deserves to be treated. I listened without speaking. I hadn't experienced that in a long time. A faint breeze passed between us. Fred finally met my eyes again. Being around you feels peaceful. There it was again. That word. Peaceful. Comfortable. Quiet. He always described me with words nobody else ever used. I smiled. I like being around you too. For the first time since we met, Fred looked almost nervous.
Not uncomfortable, just uncertain, as though he wanted to say something else, something bigger. Instead, he simply smiled. A real one this time, longer than before. And somehow, that smile meant more to me than 100 conversations with anyone else. The weekend passed more quietly than usual. I caught myself thinking about Fred far more often than I expected. Not in a dramatic way. Little moments kept returning. His rare smile, the way he remembered tiny details about me, the calm that always appeared whenever we shared a meal. By Monday morning, I almost expected him to be waiting with another cup of coffee. Instead, his desk was empty. 8 o'clock came, then 8:15. Fred never arrived late. I checked my phone twice before finally opening my email. Nothing. Around 9, Melissa walked over. Fred isn't here? I shook my head. I haven't heard anything. Mark looked across the room. Maybe he's sick. The thought stayed with me all morning. Around lunchtime, my phone vibrated. A message from Fred. Not feeling well today. I smiled without realizing it. He had never texted me before. I replied, "Take care of yourself. Let me know if you need anything." A few minutes passed. Another message appeared. "Thank you, Gerald." That tiny exchange brightened my entire afternoon. The next day, Fred returned. He looked tired. There were faint shadows beneath his eyes. When he reached his desk, I walked over. "You look better." "I am." "You should have stayed home another day." "I wanted to come." "You needed rest." He looked at me for a quiet moment. I missed our conversations. My heart skipped. I missed him too. He gave that small smile again. "I thought you might." Work remained busy, though neither of us minded. Late that afternoon, our manager stopped beside our desks. "I need one volunteer." Fred looked up. "I can help. I'll need Gerald as well." Fred glanced toward me. I expected that. Our manager laughed. "You two make a good team." After he walked away, I looked at Fred. Apparently, we've earned a reputation. I don't mind. Neither do I. We spent the next 2 hours reviewing reports together. At one point, our hands reached the same folder. Our fingers brushed. Neither of us pulled away immediately. Fred quietly cleared his throat. "I'll print the final copy." "I can do it." "I know." He still walked toward the printer. A faint smile appeared on my face. Even awkward moments felt comfortable with him. When the workday ended, I packed my bag. You heading home? Fred hesitated. Would you like to walk through the park first? That surprised me. You mean right now? Yes, I'd like that. The park sat only a few blocks from the office. Children played near the fountain. Couples wandered along the paths. A light breeze moved through the trees. Fred kept his hands in his pockets. I used to come here with my father. You mentioned him once. He liked quiet places.
I can understand why. Fred looked toward the pond. After he died, I stopped visiting. I stayed beside him without speaking. He continued after a long pause. Today felt different. Because you came? He nodded. I wanted to share this place with you. Those words carried far more meaning than their simple form. I'm glad you did. We reached a bench beneath a large oak tree. Fred sat down. I joined him. For a while, neither of us spoke. The silence never felt heavy. It felt familiar, comfortable. Fred finally turned toward me. Gerald. Yeah? I've never been good at saying what I feel. You don't have to rush. I know. He took a slow breath. When you're around, he paused, searching for the right words. My days feel lighter. I smiled. You've made mine feel that way too. His eyes met mine. Neither of us looked away. A gentle smile spread across his face. I was hoping you'd say that. The evening light faded little by little. Neither of us seemed eager to leave. It felt like we had reached the edge of a new chapter, even though neither of us had said the words waiting between us. The next morning, I woke up thinking about what Fred had said in the park. My days feel lighter. Nobody had ever described me that way before. I reached the office earlier than usual. Fred was already there. He looked up the second I walked in. Morning, Gerald. Morning. His voice carried a warmth that hadn't been there months earlier. Small, quiet, impossible to miss. I sat down and turned on my computer. A paper bag rested beside my keyboard. I looked inside. A blueberry muffin, my favorite. I looked across at him. You did this? You skipped breakfast yesterday. I laughed. You remember everything. I remember you. The words landed harder than either of us expected. Fred seemed to realize what he'd said. He looked down at his desk. I meant. I smiled. I know what you meant. His shoulders relaxed. The morning passed quickly.
By lunchtime, our manager announced another surprise. The client wants to thank the team personally. Everyone gathered in the conference room. The client shook hands around the table. When he reached Fred, he smiled politely. Excellent work. Fred nodded. Then the client turned toward me. And Gerald, your teamwork has been impressive. He looked between us. You two seem to understand each other without speaking. Several coworkers laughed. Mark leaned toward Melissa. I've been saying that for weeks. Fred glanced at me. There was a quiet smile hiding in his eyes. After the meeting, we walked back toward our desks. You embarrassed? I asked. A little. I thought it was a nice compliment. It was. He paused beside my chair. They weren't wrong. I looked up. What do you mean? You usually know what I'm thinking. I laughed. Not always. More often than anyone else. The rest of the afternoon disappeared beneath deadlines. Just before 5, I finished my final report. Fred closed his laptop at nearly the same moment. Perfect timing. "You heading home?" I asked. He hesitated. "No." "What are you doing?" He looked unusually nervous. "I wanted to ask you something." "You can ask. Walk with me." We followed the familiar route toward the small park. The evening felt calm. People passed with dogs. Children laughed near the fountain. Everything else faded into the background. Fred stopped beneath the same oak tree where we'd sat days earlier. He faced me. He rubbed one hand across the back of his neck. "I've spent most of my life keeping people at a distance." "I know." "It felt safer. You didn't trust easily." "No." He looked directly into my eyes. "Then I met you." Neither of us spoke. "I kept waiting for you to become like everyone else." "And?" "You never did." A breeze moved through the branches above us. "You respected my silence. You noticed things without judging. You never asked me to become someone different." My chest tightened. "Because I like who you are." Fred's expression softened. "I hope that was true." "It is." Another long silence settled between us. This one felt different. Neither awkward nor uncertain, just honest. Fred took one careful step closer. "I don't ignore everyone anymore." I smiled. "No? I still avoid crowds. I still prefer quiet." "But," he stopped, "but I look forward to seeing you every morning. I wait for your messages. I notice when you're smiling." His voice became even quieter. "And when you leave, I miss you." My heart was racing. "I miss you too." He searched my face one last time. "As more than a friend?" I didn't hesitate. "Yes." The word barely left my mouth before relief spread across his face. Not excitement, relief. Like he'd been carrying that question alone for a very long time. "I was afraid I'd imagined everything," he admitted. "You didn't." A smile slowly appeared. The biggest smile I'd ever seen from him. "I've never done this before."
You don't have to do anything perfectly. He nodded once. Then, very carefully, he reached for my hand. His fingers touched mine, gentle, almost hesitant. I closed the small distance between us and held his hand. Neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. After everything we'd shared, silence still understood us better than words. The walk back to the parking garage felt different. Not because the city had changed, because we had. Fred still held my hand. Not tightly, just enough that I knew he didn't want to let go. Neither did I. When we reached my car, we stopped. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then Fred smiled. "I've imagined this moment." I looked at him. "For how long?" He let out a quiet laugh. "Longer than I'd admit. I thought you were ignoring me during those first months. I was trying not to make things obvious." I blinked. "What?" "I noticed you the first week." "The first week?" "You smiled at the receptionist. You thanked the cleaning staff every morning. You helped Mark carry 3 heavy boxes without being asked." He shook his head gently. "I kept telling myself you were simply a kind person. I didn't want to become attached. But every day I noticed something else." I couldn't stop smiling. "Meanwhile, I thought you barely knew I existed." "I knew." "I knew when you had difficult mornings. I knew when you stayed late because deadlines worried you. I knew you preferred blueberry muffins over chocolate." I laughed. Apparently, I was the only one who didn't realize any of this. You were busy treating everyone well. We stood there smiling at each other like two people who had finally solved a puzzle. A puzzle neither of us realized we were building. Before getting into my car, I looked at him. Dinner tomorrow? His answer came immediately. Yes. The following weeks felt wonderfully ordinary. Fred still arrived exactly at 8. He still carried the same black backpack. He still preferred black coffee.
The difference was that every morning he stopped beside my desk first. Morning, Gerald. Every morning, without fail. Lunch became our routine. Sometimes the cafe, sometimes the little diner, occasionally the park. Nobody questioned it anymore. The office had accepted that wherever Gerald happened to be, Fred wouldn't be far away. Melissa smiled one afternoon while passing our desks. I finally figured it out. I looked up. Figured out what? She pointed between us. He never ignored everyone. Fred raised an eyebrow. She laughed. He was waiting for the right person. Then she walked away before either of us answered. Fred quietly returned to his work. A minute later, he looked toward me. She isn't completely wrong. I smiled. I know. Months passed. Autumn slowly replaced summer. The trees around the park turned gold and red. One Saturday morning, Fred invited me there again. We followed the same path beside the pond. The same bench waited beneath the oak tree. He sat beside me. I come here often now. I'm glad. I didn't for years. He looked across the water. I thought memories belonged in the past. And now? Now they feel lighter. He reached for my hand without hesitation. I think my father would have smiled if he'd met you. I squeezed his hand gently. I wish I could have met him. He would have thanked you. For what? For reminding me that quiet isn't the same as lonely. The words settled around us. Birds crossed the water. Leaves drifted through the cool afternoon air. Everything felt peaceful. I used to think people expected me to change, Fred said. You never did. I never wanted to. You listened. You waited. You accepted silence. He smiled. Then one day I realized I wasn't ignoring everyone anymore. I was looking for you. I leaned closer. And now? He looked into my eyes with complete certainty. Now I don't have to look. I already found you. I smiled before kissing him softly. Nothing dramatic. Nothing rushed. Just a quiet moment that felt exactly right. When we pulled back, Fred rested his forehead against mine. I love you, Gerald. The words came naturally, as though he'd been carrying them for a long time. I smiled even wider. I love you too, Fred. For someone everyone believed ignored the world, Fred had always been paying attention. He simply saved his heart for the one person who made silence feel like home.